What we're going to be learning next is we're going to learn about the hover method, and this is going to allow us to create a look on our page that is going to enhance it a little bit. When we roll over our buttons, the text changes color, and that is of being styled by our CSS. What I'd ultimately like to have happen is I'd like these little tabs to change color when we hover over, just to enhance this and make it a little bit more visually strong as far as what the user is doing. So we could accomplish this by just using straight CSS. If we look in our CSS file, currently the background color is being styled by the ul nav li rule that we have right here, and that's making the background color yellow. So if I went ahead and I created a new rule here that targeted the li hover and added a background color, and in this case I'm going to use orange, and we go ahead and we save this and test it in the browser, you'll see that this does actually accomplish what we want to accomplish here. The text changes color as well as the tab this time. This does display in the modern browsers the way we want, but if you've been working in web pages, you know that IE support for any of the pseudo class of hover on anything except for the A tag is not very good. It's pretty much non-existent in the older browsers, and some of the newer versions of IE support it, but not really in the way that it should. So it's not really a trusty solution unless you go ahead and add some hacks to make it work. But using jQuery, we can accomplish this quite easily. So we'll go ahead and we'll remove this rule right here, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to create a class that we can call using jQuery. So I'm just going to go ahead and set up a new class, and I'm going to call it nav hover, and I'm just going to go ahead and put the .nav here so that I can be a little more specific, letting my page know that the nav hover is only going to occur in the class called .nav, and I'll go ahead and specify that I want the background of this particular class to be the orange color, just like we did before. And actually, just to keep my CSS a little bit more organized, let's just put it underneath these other rules that we have for the navigation. It looks like I already have this in my CSS file. I must have left it here from before, so let me just delete this one, and we'll go from here. So here's the rule that we actually want to create, the .nav, and it's the .nav hover. And we'll go ahead and we'll save our CSS file, and of course if we refresh this in the browser, it's not going to have any effect on the browser because that class that we just created is not being called by the CSS at all. Now that we have that though, we can come back into our jQuery page and we can go ahead and we can use the .hover method to be able to style the tabs in the way we want. We're going to be using .hover, and the .hover method basically it binds handlers for both mouse enter and mouse leave events, and you can just use it by simply applying this particular method to an item that you want to put it on. So let's go ahead and create this and see how we can get it to work in the way we want. I'm going to start by telling jQuery that I want this to affect any list item that is located inside the .nav class. And once I've specified that, I'm going to go ahead and use the .hover method, and the .hover method is going to then call a function. So we'll go ahead and put that in there, and let's just close our function over here. And then what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll write what we want to have happen. So I'm going to use our keyword of this, which we've used before, letting jQuery know that I want to target this list item that I'm calling, that's calling the function. That's what I want to affect. And we're going to go ahead and use our add class method. That should actually be a capital C right there. And I'm going to then pass on the parameter of what I actually want to call. So I want to call the nav hover parameter and apply that to this. So let's go ahead and let's give this a quick test in our browser. It looks like I have some sort of error because I have my red error yelling at me right now. Oh, you know what? I'm missing my parenthesis right here. Okay, that should take care of it. Alright, so let's save this and let's go ahead and test this in the browser. And when I mouse over, it is making these look the way that I want them to look. There is, however, a problem. When I mouse away, they don't revert back to the yellow state of the tab, so they're kind of stuck with this orange state. And the reason why is because this particular effect, it needs to accept a parameter that is called a callback function, and we'll look at this a little bit more specifically in the next exercise. But the callback is going to specify code that needs to run after this particular method is, or effect, has finished doing whatever it is that it needs to do, in this case applying the nav hover class. So what we're going to do is we're going to pass in a second parameter to the effect action, and we're going to be using the anonymous function to be able to do that. So what I'm going to write here is I'm going to put a curly brace, and this time I'm just going to put a comma after the curly brace, and this is going to allow me to pass in another function. So I'll go ahead and tell jQuery that I want to pass in another function, and the function that we want to pass in is going to be that this, once again talking about the list item, we want to remove the class, and then I need to pass on which class it is that I want to remove, which in this case is the nav hover class, just like we did before. So what this basically says here is it says find any list items that are inside of nav. When the hover method is felt or invoked, then you want to take the list item and add the class of nav hover, and then we're going to go ahead and pass on an additional parameter, because the hover method is a special effect that has kind of two parameters that you can pass on, the mouse over and the mouse off type of effect, and then we're going to go ahead and remove the class. So if we save this and if we refresh it, you can see that when we hover over, now these are working the way we want them to work, and you can see that this just adds a little bit more excitement and interest and visual clues to our web page that yes, indeed, you are on the cocktail tab or the tasty treats tab or whatever it is that you might be hovering over. So this is a great addition to what we've already talked about, and it definitely enhances the page that we've been working on.